Okay, great. I'm going to turn things over to Marian Deeney.
Good morning, everybody. This morning we're going to talk about completing our public library construction grant applications in our new online system. So if that's not what you think you were coming to, now's your chance to get out. If not, we're going to jump right in. And Melissa, you want to go ahead and turn everything on over to me? So I'll start driving then, I guess. Oops, hang on, get that up there. There we go. Okay. The first thing we want to do is just talk about the public library construction grant applications and process in general. I know there are some folks on here who applied in the previous cycle, but the funding unfortunately was not approved by the legislature. So before we get started into the actual application, I wanted to give you all a heads up. For those of you that submitted last year and want to have your funding considered, you do not need to complete an application in the system right now. You do not need to worry about this July 28th deadline. I will be sending you some separate information to inquire as if you want your application to be rolled over, and then you will just need to give us a couple pieces of updated information, and then we take care of the process from here for you. So that's the one thing you don't have to worry about, trying to come in and complete a brand new application right now. So now what I'm going to go ahead and talk about is the application process itself. Public library construction grants are due on July 28th, 2017. That's a Friday. They must be submitted by 11:59 p.m. With our new system, I am extremely, highly, I don't know how hard to emphasize this, don't wait till the last minute. Get it submitted as soon as you can, because the system is frankly a work in progress, and we think we get everything addressed, and we have another little bug come up. So we don't want, and we are working with folks if they are working on the application and something happens. We're working with everybody, but we just don't want you to be at the last minute trying to work on it at 6 o'clock on the 28th, and there's no one here to be able to help you. So just a little heads up on that. The application, as I said, are due on July 28th. There are some basic eligibility requirements with the application. Applicants must be a county, a municipality, a special district, or a special taxing district. They must have an established program of free library services. To receive a grant, the grant itself must be requesting more than $10,000 from the state. The building must be greater than 3,000 square feet. And the project must result in a completed library facility. You cannot apply for funds to build the 4 walls and the roof and then come in down the road for another grant to complete the interior. It must be all completed at one time. There is also funding. The grant program does require a matching grant. It's a matching grant program. It's a dollar-for-dollar match, and the maximum grant you can apply for is $500,000. And so you would have to have at least $500,000 in matching funds. If your library or city or county is has been designated a READY county or community, Rural Economic Development Initiative, or it's now rural, going blank on the terms, there's another term for it now, you can request a waiver of the matching funds for the grant. So that's part of the application process. So that's sort of the overall the basic requirements for the application. What happens when the grant application is submitted? It is reviewed here at the division. It is scored according to criteria that are listed in the grant guidelines. I'm showing you right now our webpage for our public library construction grants. The grant guidelines packet is right here on the page. You can download that, and it has all the specifics, the administrative requirements, the components of the application, the eligibility, all of that information is available for you. The applications are reviewed, they are scored, and then based upon that scoring, they are then ranked. They're put in numerical order and then ranked according to scores, with a few exceptions, such that if somebody submits multiple applications from an organization, the easiest way for me to explain is everybody gets one chance at the money, and then if you have additional applications, they are ranked. They are included, they are ranked, but they are further down on the list. What will happen this year with any projects that were not funded by the legislature and that wish to roll over. The scores from last year's application will be used, and then the rollover applications will be combined with the new applications to make one combined ranking list that will be provided to the legislature for their next session. And the next session will be, I believe, in January of next year. So it is a little bit earlier, this upcoming session, and then they will review the funding request list and determine whether to provide any funding. And then, of course, it goes into the budget. Then the governor must approve the budget. And then once that, assuming everything makes it through all of that process, you would get a grant award on July 1, 2018 for your project. And then you would have 2 years to complete that actual construction grant. You can start your project early. You can start the project anytime after July 1, 2017, up to 12 months before the date of the grant award, and still be eligible to receive a construction grant. Starting a project in terms of the grant requirements means actually awarding a construction bid or a guaranteed maximum price or anything of that nature where you're actually locking in a price and starting the work. Any of the preparatory activities such as working on plans, drawings, preparing things for bids, acquiring property, any of those things can be done at any point in time, and you will still remain eligible for the grant. You just cannot award a construction contract before July 1 of 17 and be eligible. Okay, any questions at this point on the overall process of the grant? Give everybody a second here, and I'll take a quick sip here of water. Okay, what we're going to do now is to jump into the actual online application in our grants system. The first page here I'm going to show you is the home page for our Department of State grant system. This is our new system that's being used by all divisions in the department to apply for all grant funding. So if you have already applied for a Library Services and Technology Act grant, if you are applying for any cultural grants, historical resources grants, elections, everybody is applying in this system. And you will also be using this system to apply for state aid grants. This is the home page. You will need to get a login and password, and then you will also then need to be associated to a library organization. We are in the process of setting up library organizations, so to help facilitate the process, and we're trying to do this very methodically so that we get everything very consistent. Let us know if you are wanting to apply for a grant, and we will put your library to a top of the priority list in order to get your library set up and so that you can then start working on your application. You can send an email to me or to Catrice Stewart or to David Beach here, the grants team here at the division, and we will get you set up in the system, and then you can go ahead and start on the applications. For those of you that are already set up in the system, those of you know who you are, you can then just go right ahead and start applying for an application. Once you have logged into the system, you will come to this home page here. And this is basically what you'll see, where you see applications, or you will see any messages, that type of thing. This is your home page. To apply for the grant, you would go over here to this tab, and the pull down will come down, Apply for Grant, and you would click on that. And then this will show all of the applications that are currently open. It shows all of the applications for the department, as well as the ones that are currently open and accepting applications. And in this case here, the construction application is open, and you would just click on Apply Now, and it will go through the process of setting up the application. It's going to take a moment on our system. What I am going to do is jump back a page here and go directly to the application, which I have already set up, and of course it's not there. And we'll give it a second here there we go. Okay, we'll give it a second here to set itself up. And in this case, thank you to Melissa Clark, who's also on here. I am pretending to be part of Tampa Hillsborough library system. And so to do that, you would then just hit continue, and it will then set up the components of the application. One thing you need to consider, there are certain documents that are that will be required for every application, and then there are additional documents that will be due if you wish to start the project early. So you need to consider this very carefully. If you have everything ready to go and all of the additional documents ready to go, then you would then select that you're going to start early. If you are not sure or you do not have all of the additional documents available, some of them do take some time to get, I would not recommend that you check starting early, because the system will not let you submit your application until you've submitted all of the required components. Now, this is the base page of the application. The only thing that you will see that's different is you will not get this staging environment message. This is a place where we can go to show you what's happening. You would not see that, but everything else is exactly like you will see it on the application. On the left-hand side here are all of the application components that could possibly be due on the application. As you go through each of the application components, if you have met all of the validation checks, in other words, if there's a document to be submitted or a required text to be put in somewhere, it will then show a check that you have completed that section. If not, then you will get an error message, and you can still continue and keep going on the application. You just have to resolve all of those errors before you submit the application. The first thing you would do in this would be to select, and we will have preloaded some of this information, in this case the director, and then the project manager. I'm going to make myself, or I'm actually pretending to be Catrice Stewart today in the system, and that's going to be the project manager. And then this is the key where I was just telling you about starting the project prior to the grant award, and for the moment I'm going to check no. And if you are Rural Economic Development Initiative eligible, you would check yes, and if you're not, you would just check no. And then I would recommend you can then save it. And then if there are any messages, error messages, you should see them on that page here. If not, you would see it down here on this review and submit page. But you can see back up here, I have completed everything, so there a check comes up. From here, you can then go to the next page, and you can also submit, you can work on this in any order. You do not have to go A to B to C to D. You could jump to another section. You can either do that by checking next or going to that specific section. And this is where you would fill out information on your proposed project. The project name, and in this case we're going to build a new building, and it's going to be a branch library. And so we're done there, so we'll go to the next section. The test site is a little slow this morning, so bear with me. Any questions? At any point, if you do have questions, please just put your hand up, and Melissa will flag me down and tell me to stop here. So,
or you can put them into chat. We're keeping an eye on that too.
Yep. Okay, the next page is project data. And this is where you're going to tell us about the project, what's happening prior to the project. There is no facility. And after the project is completed, we're going to build a new, I'm going to say, how about 25,000 square foot facility. I can't say that quickly. And I'm going to leave something blank here and see what happens. And I'm going to save it. And if you notice up here on the left side, there's no check mark yet on the project data, because when I scroll back down here, I forgot to put the geographic area in. So I'll put that in there, and then I should be able to go to the next one with no problem then. It's thinking. It really is thinking. I do want to say that if you're on the live site, it is a bit faster than what you're seeing here because it's a test environment. They're tracking all kinds of stuff as we test here. This section here is the breakdowns of the cost of the project. I'm just going to add a little sidebar here too. For those of you that have done construction grant applications in the past, we are not asking for anything new. It's all the same information. It just looks a little bit different here on the page. There are two portions. There's the estimated cost of the project by category and then by source of funds. And I'm just going to put some numbers in here. Now go down here and I'll see what I do with the this will do, when you save it, it will do automatic totals for you. As you can see here, I've got $2,010,000, so I better put something in here. I'm going to ask for the full amount of construction funding. And then I need to, let's see, I should have made a simpler number. Can't do fast math and talk at the same time. And if I decide I want to go back here, I'm not going to worry about that. I'll just take this amount out. It's the same process all over again. If you are doing anything early and have already expended funds for the project, they can count as match, but you just need to talk about them. Tell us about what you've already done on that section there. And then we'll go on to the next page. The next section is the where you are required to provide a resolution or an ordinance that gives us certain assurances from your governing body that you're authorized to submit the application, who can sign it, that you'll have the matching unless you're a ready county or community, that you'll have enough funding to complete the project, and that you'll have enough funds to operate the library once the project is done, and that you will use the project for public library purposes for a 20-year period. So those are the assurances that you are required. And in this case here, you can then just, once you have the copy of the assurance, or excuse me, the ordinance or the resolution, you would then just upload the document by browsing, selecting, hitting upload, and then adding the document. I'm not going to do that right now. You can actually upload multiple documents if you so choose, if you have multiple things to be loaded related to that ordinance. The next section are the establishment documents for the library, and that could be things such as an interlocal agreement, part of your city or county code, whatever you have that shows that you have an established program, of library services. And you, again, the same process. You would just select the file or files, upload them, and then save it. If you need to give us any additional notes or clarification, you can add that in here, but that part is not required. And then the next section is the narrative description of the project, and you can then can provide this information to us. You are not limited to the size of the box. There is a little caret down here, and you can drag and make the box larger or smaller up to this size. There are some basic formatting tools here. What I would recommend for any place where you are adding information into text boxes is that you would work on that information in Word or in Notepad, and then once you are completed editing it, copy and paste that into the application here. Just to make it's a little bit easier to edit outside of this text box. It's a little bit easier to see, but that's strictly up to you and your choice. But just to make sure, in case something goes hiccupy, you still have your information in case it somehow, for some reason, does not retain itself in the system. And we also, just to note, we have run into some bugs. The developers are aware of this. When things are copied from Word or Notepad to the system, sometimes the formatting does go a little bit wonky, is the easiest term I'm going to use. We are not penalizing anybody for that. We know that it happens. It may look perfect when you put it in, and then when you save it, sometimes the system does something, or it's some of the coding when the stuff is copied over. We are aware of it, and we're just telling the evaluators, just don't disregard that. Don't penalize them based upon some formatting issues. They are working on a resolution to that. We're just not sure that it's going to be addressed before the applications are due. So in the building project narrative, you would tell us how your building will function in the current library organization. And I'm doing this very briefly here. County system in an unserved area. You can give us as much information as you would like. There is a basic spell check in here as well. How it will contribute to new or improved services in the area. Add that information. And tell us the effects of staffing, maintaining, and the costs of operating the proposed facility. What we are looking for in this section, when we say the effects, is I'm looking for specific dollars. You need to take that into account in your budgeting and planning. If you're opening a new branch, you're going to need additional staff, you're going to need utilities, maintenance, whatever else might be anticipated with the project. We want to be sure that you've thought about that as you're working on this building project, so that it's not a surprise to you in the end. So you need to address that. If it's a renovation project and it's not going to cause you any additional costs and you're aware of that, or it's something that's going to be absorbed, you can address that in that manner as well. So those first 3 sections are required. If there's some additional information, we have a notes field here if you should need it. Okay. The next section is the building program, and this is the document where you will provide this is typically the document that you are going to prepare that will give you and the architect and us all of the information about how the building will, you're giving a verbal description of how the building will lay out, how areas of the facility are related to each other. Reference needs to be away from the children's area for quiet research, etc. Those types of things, so that the architect can then take this information and build you a library or design a library for you. So the first part of it needs to include an overview of the library, historical perspective, your mission and goals of the library, and it also needs to include a description of how each of the library functions relate to each other, including space, patron workflow patterns. In other words, you come in the front door, there should be a reference a circulation desk, and then off to the side will be the children's area, hopefully in an enclosed area, whatever those things might need to be. And then you also need to provide us information on your future needs based upon any future demographics. You're building a new branch here. You're also anticipating this to be a huge growth area in your service area, so you're building it so that you can then expand it down the road. And this will be a document you would prepare outside of the system, because it's typically a lengthy document. It's not just 1 or 2 pages. It's usually quite lengthy, and you would just attach that here and upload that into the system. Okay, any questions? Okay, the next section would be if you are applying from more than one state funding source. If you are not doing that, you would just check no, and you're done in this section. If you are applying from more than one state funding source, an example might be you are also getting funding, applying for funding from Division of Historical Resources. If you're renovating a historic building, this is going to be used as a library. You would tell us what funding tell us who you're working with, and the information, where the funding is coming from, the funding sources, and how that's going to contribute to the overall success of the project. We'll give you the option to either explain it or to upload any additional documentation to show what you're trying to do there. Okay, this information here, A through I, are all of the required parts that you need to submit if you are not starting the project early. So once you've gotten through I, you would then come down here to the Review and Submit button. And the Review and Submit button, once this comes up here in just a second, this is where it will tell you if you have any errors that need to be addressed before you could submit your application. And if you don't, then you're ready to submit your application. There we go. And as I mentioned before, you can see I left some of these blanks, so you're getting error messages of each of these things that needs to be addressed before you can submit the application. These things are links, so if you're not sure what they're talking about, you can click on that link. It'll take you back to that section of where you need to complete some more information. Once you get rid of all of these things, you'll have a message that says you're ready to submit your application. You would check the certification system. You would type your name in, and then you can submit the application. Now, of course, as you're being set up in the system, staff will have one of two roles. They will either have an editor role or a submitter role. As we set the organizations up, the library director will have a submitter role, and everyone else will have editor roles unless we are told otherwise that other folks have that authority to submit applications on behalf of the library. And so we can work with you if you need to have some adjustments made to that part of the application or the organization. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is assume that you have gone back, assuming you're going to start early. And so we'll check that. We'll save it. And we'll go down here to the remaining parts of the document. The application, excuse me. The next section that you are required to submit is the site information. And this is the location where the building is at. And it will be there in just a second. There we go. Okay, the site information is where you're going to give us several pieces. This is related to the actual site where the building is currently located or where you're going to build a new facility. You'll tell us about what are any plans for expansion or growth on that site. If you're siting it so that you can add another 25,000 square feet to the existing 25,000, or if you're building it such that you're not anticipating any more growth and this is as big a facility as you're going to put in there, or if you're building a first story and you anticipate being able to expand upward, that type of thing. You want to tell us, related to the site, what kind of community growth and traffic pattern projections are being considered based for this site that you are building on. And tell us about taking into consideration zoning and building codes and standards. In other words, if your facility, your community has a requirement of 5 parking spaces for every X number of thousand square feet, you need to tell us what that is and how you are factoring that into your plans. The next section is tell us where your site is located in terms of major pedestrian routes, vehicular traffic routes, if it's on a main drag or if it's on the bus routes or the sidewalks, it's right next to a school, so you're going to have a walkway right over to the library. Whatever those things are, you want to put that information in here. And then finally, you want to tell us the physical characteristics of your site. And this is just so you'll have an idea of what you're going to have to deal with when you are developing the site if you know this. If it's an undeveloped site, that it's basically flat, sandy soil with pine trees that are going to be cut down, whatever that might be, just add that information and just tell us there. You also have the option with this site information to do this in a Word document, and you can actually just upload that document as opposed to putting information in each section. It is up to you of what you want to do for that. And then we have an additional section down here in case there are some notes or other information that you want to tell us. Unconditional use is the next section. You need to show to us that you have legal title or unconditional use for at least 20 years on the property if you are leasing the property. And that could be, you can give us a copy of the title, anything of that nature that shows this information. If you have included this unconditional use assurance in that original ordinance or resolution back up here at the beginning of the project, you can just click include it in another section, then add to the notes. It's included in that ordinance or resolution, so you don't have to do something separate. It just depends upon your situation. We've tried to accommodate as many variations and possibilities as we could here. If you are in an organization that's working with a partner on a joint use facility and you will not have unconditional use until further along in the project, you need to have that spelled out in an interlocal agreement or something of that nature and provide that here to us that will tell us when that title will be transferred or that unconditional use will be transferred title over to the applicant. And we can work with you on that. And that process is laid out in the grant guidelines. Okay, the next section is comparison to standards. And this is where you're going to provide us, you're going to compare your project to the standard for square footage for total floor space as well as specific standards regarding different parts of your project. You can do this in that text box, or you can provide us a document and just upload it and attach it. In this case, folks often do a table with this information. They'll say, here's the standard, here's what our project's going to do, and here's the source of that standard, such as the 0.6 square foot per capita standard. All of the different standards are recommendations in the Florida Library Association standards, so you can get the most current standards there. There's citings for where they are from, such as for lighting and telecom, that type of thing. So that's what you need to give us for each of the areas: floor space, and then for all of the library functions such as public areas, staff area, meeting space, comparison to the standards, shelving, staffing, lighting, and then the telecommunications and electrical requirements. So that's all the information of what's going on in your project. You will also need to provide a list of the initial furniture and equipment that will be needed for the project. You want to tell us how many and what you're going to be using. Most folks do this on a spreadsheet or a Word document, so we just said, okay, we're not going to make you transfer this over. You can just attach that document and upload it. Subsurface soil analysis. This is the soil borings to give you assurance that the site can support the weight of a library building. It is required for all new construction. It's required if you are expanding an existing facility onto previously unbuilt land, and that includes parking lots. And it's also is required for projects that are involving an existing building that was not previously used as a library building. The only place where you are not required to do this is if you are using an existing library building and remodeling it interior only. You are not required to do the soil borings. It's basically for your protection. We've had a number of folks that have found unexpected things when the soil borings have been done. They have found pipe clay. They have found water table much higher than they expected. Things like that that had to be addressed before they could actually complete the building or start the building. So that's why we require this in here. Oops, excuse me, wrong page here. The next section is the flood hazard analysis. This is where you will get this information from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, not your local county, not your local planning department, not the engineers. This has to come from the Corps of Engineers, and there are very specific requirements and information that you need to send to them, tell them what you need about your project. That is all spelled out in the grant guidelines. We have the addresses, phone numbers, and everything. It's a pretty straightforward process if you follow all those instructions. I'm not going to go into all the details on those. The next, same thing as the next one. Once you'll get a letter back from the Corps of Engineers, and you just need to attach that and upload that here. And it usually takes at least 30 days to get that flood hazard analysis back. Historic site assurance. This is the same similar type process that you work with the Division of Historic Resources here in the Department of State, and provide information about the project. Then to be sure, they will certify or provide assurance that the project doesn't interfere with protection of projects that are either listed on the National Register of Historic Sites or eligible for listing on the National Register, or if there's any other thing else that they may know about the location that may not have been I won't. It just may be, they may need to be aware of if it's a potential site that needs to be monitored as you are doing site work and that type of thing. So again, there's specific information, specific address that this goes to. Once you get that letter back, you would just attach that and upload that here. And then the last item here on this section is the competitive award assurance. This is where you are going to provide assurance that you will competitively award construction contracts based on sealed bids, response to requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, competitive negotiations. Bottom line is they want a competitive process to award the construction contract. You can choose to provide this assurance as part of that initial resolution and only have to do it everything one time. If that's the case, like I said before, you would just check include it in another section and upload it. Or you can also, if you don't want to do that, you can provide us information here related to your procurement practices, your procurement manual, that type of thing, where you're going to assure us that you will follow those processes. And so then the same process here at the very end. You get to the end and you see what you still need to fix. Since I didn't load anything up here in this section, you can see my list got quite extensive. So assuming we address all those things, you would then check the box, put the name in, and then submit the application, and that's all you have to do. So that's the whole application. You can come in and out of this application at any time, as many spots as you want in this whole application. You do not have to sit down and complete it all at once, and you do not have to complete it all in linear order. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the floor open for questions. Did I miss something? Any have burning questions on anything here?
This is Melissa. We're going to keep an eye on the chat and for hand raising. So whatever questions you've got, we are ready to take them now. You're welcome, Robin. And from the lack of questions, I guess we'll just assume that everybody has perfect applications. Lois, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I missed the first few minutes. How and when do the rollover grants, how are we updating information to provide it if we already have the grant completed for this fiscal year?
Yeah, sorry you were a few minutes late there. That's the first thing I jumped on, Lois. We will be sending you some information. It'll take a little bit before it comes out, and we will basically ask if you want your application rolled over. You have to update a little bit of information for us, and then we will take care of getting the application rolled over. You will not have to go in and do every piece of this application. We already have that information, so we will load it up for you or get it rolled over for you. So, you know, just for those of you that had submitted applications last year that were not funded, stay tuned, and I'll be back to you as soon as I can get some stuff out through our review process and out the door to everybody. But you will have a communication either from myself or from Amy Johnson in the near future.
Okay, thank you.
What we do is once we get that, all the rollover applications and then all the submitted applications in this cycle, we will take the scores from everybody, re-rank those applications, and that will be the new list going to the legislature.
Okay, now if, are we tied into the July 28th deadline or not?
No, you do not. If you are rolling an application over, you do not need to worry about that July 28th deadline. I'm not sure of my timing to get stuff out, but you don't have to worry about that July 28th deadline.
Okay, now one other question. If we are adding or deleting any aspects of the original grant, let's say, for example, now we're looking at adding additional parking or something like that, okay, would that require a whole new application or simply considered an update?
I think we can update that, and I can talk to you a little bit more detail after the application, after the webinar about that, Lois.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay. And as Melissa said, I'll be available. Everybody knows where to find me via email, via phone, whatever. Send us messages. The easiest way, frankly, for me right now, I've been running between a lot of meetings and a lot of work with this new grant system. Send me an email, and I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. and we'll take care of any questions that you have, any issues that you have.
Does anybody have any other questions? We'll stay on for a few more minutes just to make sure we get everything answered. For those of you that are busy and have things to do, thank you for being on with us. Like I said, we'll stay on for a few more minutes to make sure we get everything answered.
I didn't want to hog the conversation. I know you mentioned that, the ranking would change based upon, the new applications as well as the rollovers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Would updates to the rollover grants also perhaps have an impact on where the ranking is?
Typically, the update, if an application rolls over, we typically do not rescore the application.
Okay.
It's up to you. I don't have it here right in front of me, but we can take a look at it. A lot of the scoring is based upon very specific criteria, and it's not really something that you can really affect the scoring.
Okay.
If that makes sense. But we can take a look at that and see if it's something you want to update and have rescored or not. That's up to you.
Okay.
We try and make it as easy for folks to simply roll over the applications, but if they want to do that, they can have it updated and rescored. We can do that, but so we need to just look at. What I would suggest is we sit down and look at it and say, is it worth it or not? Frankly.
Yeah. Because I was thinking in terms of the, if we were talking about adding additional parking in the southeast corner of our property, that then would require, of course, new subsoil boring and new flood hazard analysis.
Right, but that's not going to affect the scoring. So, see that type of thing. The scoring is really based upon, the biggest numbers in the scoring are based upon the need of basically the square footage compared to the 0.6 square footage that you have available right now compared to 0.6 square foot per capita. In other words, we try those that are furthest away from the standard get more points. And then if it's a headquarters library versus a branch library versus a member, there's some different things like that where the scoring is pretty locked that you really can't change anything.
Okay, great. Yeah, that certainly fits.
Ones where you can affect it and see if you want to update them or not.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Marian.
Do you have my contact info? Sure, I'll put that right out in the chat right now.
Marian's putting her contact information.
I can type.
Which, for those of you watching the recording, is marian.deeney@dos.myflorida.com.
I just realized I hit it without the phone number. Here's the phone number. Oh, and I just sent to Brendan. Dang it. Thank you, Brendan. And it looks like Dave. Oh, you just added David's too. Great.
Yep.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you.
Went to the website and grabbed contact info.
Okay. Any more questions?